Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. The nationwide baby formula shortage has been a terrifying experience for lots of families, which is why Congress and the White House just took action. The House passed two bills, one which would make it easier for poor families to access formula. Now, that passed with near universal support, which that's good. The second bill, the one specifically designed to address the baby formula crisis by giving the Food and Drug Administration $28 million towards that end, that bill was opposed by nearly 200 House Republicans. Just voted no. Now, that might come as something of a surprise to you if you've been paying attention to politics over the past few weeks. Republicans across the country have been using the formula shortage as a cudgel to attack Democrats ahead of November's midterm elections. The attacks were everywhere. TV, social media, right-wing radio. Elise Stefanik, the highest-ranking Republican woman in the House, even held a press conference on the formula issue last week.
Right now, families across America are struggling to feed their babies due to a horrific nationwide baby formula shortage. And I cannot think of a more harrowing, panicked crisis for parents to face than desperately trying to find food and formula for their newborn babies. Joe Biden simply has no plan. House Republicans are here to push for action from the FDA and the Biden administration, who should have had a plan for this shortage months ago. Instead, bare shelves Biden has continued to pass the buck.
Well, the Biden administration has a plan now. They invoked the Defense Production Act yesterday. They announced that. And Elise Stefanik, the third most powerful person in the House, just voted against a big part of the plan. And she's not alone. Every single person in the soundbite I'm going to play you also voted against it.
Moms and dads all over the country, some of them are traveling hours every single day looking for baby formula. This is a crisis that should never be happening, and this is completely, squarely on the shoulders of the Biden administration and the Democrats that are controlling our government.
President Biden and the FDA must do more. This is a matter of life or death.
Maybe that's where this shortage is coming from, or it could be the pallets that are being sent to the southern border for all the illegal aliens breaking our laws to come into our country.
Stark reminder, amid the ceaseless culture war of American life, what most of governing is actually about, like the $28 million to the FDA to try to help solve this crisis, right? Governing, real governing, the actual thing that our elected representatives do or should be doing is dealing with the allocation of resources, implementing regulations, attempting to solve difficult problems, trying to make a wide swath of people's lives materially better, giving them the tools and ability to flourish. Those fundamentals of governance, like the brass tack stuff, is basically the last thing Republicans want to talk about. It's become even more obvious during these high-profile Republican primaries, like in Pennsylvania, where the too close to call race between the hedge fund millionaire Dave McCormick and the millionaire TV Dr. Mehmet Oz is basically all culture war grievance politics. Now, I should be fair. There are essentially two issues Republican candidates will tell you squarely where they stand. Abortion, which they think should be banned increasingly in all cases, maybe even criminalized for doctors and women, and guns, which they think should be widely available and not regulated or restricted in any other way. Other than that, Republicans running for office do not talk about actual policy. It's just fear-mongering about critical race theory and LGBTQ rights, and pledging to fire Dr. Fauci and to lift the COVID mandates that have already been lifted, and the, quote, invasion at the border. A big part of the reason Republicans don't want to talk actual policy is because their entire economic agenda, such as it exists, which can be a little hard to figure out, is wildly unpopular. Cut taxes for the wealthiest Americans, give handouts to big business, cut benefits for working families, kneecap labor unions, do nothing to improve the lives of regular working people. Which is why when Donald Trump first ran for president back in 2016, he didn't really focus on his economic agenda or the Republican Party's economic agenda. He ran a nativist campaign built on cultural war grievances and white identity politics and trade. That was the one area of policy. Trade, where he disagreed with the Republican mainstream. Correctly so, in intuiting what people wanted to hear. But then once he actually took office, remember this, there was one big legislative domestic policy accomplishment. One, it was an enormous tax cut focused on corporations, the largest corporate tax cut in 30 years, and also disproportionately going to the wealthy. And it is worth noting that the lowest point in Donald Trump's approval rating over 4 years, other than the days immediately after January 6th, was in late 2017, when Republicans were publicly debating their tax cuts, which were then and remain remarkably unpopular with voters. And I gotta say, give them credit. Republicans, most of them, are savvy enough, and they know this. In fact, Republican Senate leader Mitch McConnell put it best when asked about his party's agenda heading into the midterms.
If Republicans take back control of Congress after the midterms, what would be your agenda?
That is a very good question. And I'll let you know when we take it back.
Ha 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 ha. I'm not telling you. I know that telling you what I'm going to do will make it less likely we win. Now, the only person, as far as I can tell in the Republican Party, or one of the few, who is not in on the joke, who didn't get the memo, is Republican Senator Rick Scott of Florida. He's the head of the National Republican Senatorial Committee and the guy in charge of getting Republicans elected in the Senate. Now, he just went and released his own agenda full of things Republicans actually want to do instead of just the culture war distractions they talk about in the campaign trail. In a draconian move that brings new meaning to the term regressive taxation, Scott's plan would raise taxes for poor and working families. He says they need to, quote, have skin in the game, while cutting funding and employees to the IRS, making it harder to audit the super rich for tax evasion. Oh, get this. Scott's plan would also end Social Security and Medicare within 5 years. End it. And in many ways, Senator Scott is the perfect messenger for this agenda because he himself, good for him, richest member of Congress, multimillionaire from the time running his for-profit healthcare companies, including the one which was fined $1.7 billion for Medicare fraud. They were keeping 2 sets of books while he was the CEO. But Scott committed the cardinal sin here. He talked about actual policy, particularly actual economic policy. And unsurprisingly, guess what? No one likes him. His ideas are very unpopular, which is why his fellow senators and allies in the right-wing media are trying to get him to shut up.
I spoke to several senators, and they said nobody signed on to Rick Scott's plan. Nobody. And that means nobody. It's never going to make the floor. Mitch McConnell doesn't like it. Rick Scott's a junior senator from Florida. Who cares?
Pay no attention to the agenda outlined by the man trying to win a Senate majority. But you know what? Good for Rick Scott. At least he's being honest and somewhat transparent about what he wants to do, while the rest of Republicans want you to pay attention to the imaginary immigrant invasion and the 1619 Project. But here's the thing, and I can't stress this strongly enough. Politics, ultimately, is not a cable news show. It's not a Twitter fight. It's real people and real groups of people with real material interests. Which brings me to the latest outburst from the billionaires. Elon Musk, you may have noticed, has now declared Democrats are too mean. They hurt his feelings, and because of that, he will now be voting Republican from now on. And Jeff Bezos, the third richest man in the world, has suddenly started attacking President Biden on Twitter after Biden held an event with leaders from the Amazon Union. Let me say my suspicion is that Musk and Bezos' ire towards Biden and the Democrats has nothing to do with tone and everything to do with their fortunes, which is to say their material interests. They know which party is better for billionaires. And to that I say, good. If Democrats are doing anything right, billionaires should be voting Republican. The fact that billionaires are coming out against them means they are. So the Biden administration should keep supporting unions and aggressively enforcing existing labor laws, and Democrats should focus on actually improving the material conditions of people's lives and making sure that voters know, whatever the cultural controversy of the day is, as soon as Republicans take power, they will use that power to benefit corporate America and the interests of the very rich. They've done it time and time again. They'll do it again. And if Rick Scott is believed, they'll hike taxes for working people to boot. Everyone across the country should know that when they vote.